Welcome to Real Herbalism Radio. Today's episode is a re-airing of a classic show, and until today was available only to the Herbal Nerd Society. So myself, Sue, and Candace use this time to harvest herbs and the fruits of summer. Just kick back and relax and enjoy this classic. So on with our sponsors. Our first sponsor this week is Candace Hunter Creations.
Candace Hunter Creations, helping you create the holistic, natural lifestyle you want to live.
And Occupy Medical.
Occupy Medical, a free integrated health clinic, herbalism and medicine together, and healthcare is a human right.
All right. And from Hunter Creation, where they do graphic design and website design to fit your needs, where their motto is, yes, they can do that. And finally, from thepracticalherbalist.com. And I had the website up here, but it disappeared. What's our tag? Here it is. Practical advice on herbs, herbalism, and the holistic lifestyle. That's our sponsors for this show. The path into herbalism can be a gentle one, but often it begins with a dramatic initiation or a calling so intense it cannot be ignored. Herbalists emerging from such a crucible carry with them a particularly magical way of combining herbs and healing. Today we're talking with clinical herbalist and herbal educator Rosalie della Foret, author of Alchemy of Herbs, about the transformative power of plants to heal on many levels. Now here are your hosts, Candace Hunter and Sue Lupe.
I'm Candace Hunter.
And I'm Sue Lupe.
And welcome to Real Herbalism Radio. Welcome, Rosalie.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
We're very honored to have you.
Yeah.
And I'm super excited to hear about your path. You guys, you've had quite an interesting walk into herbs, haven't you?
I have. Yeah, the introduction was really a beautiful way of talking about that too. I appreciated that.
So where did you start? Where you had we went, note to the listeners, we cheated. We already read the book.
Yeah, we got lucky.
That's right. So we noted in there that you were talking about how you had a fairly non-herbal background, but here you are completely immersed in the deep end, as it were, with herbs. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. I grew up in a household that didn't really use herbs. And I would say that I was interested in natural health from a very young age. Like I was definitely kind of a weird kid. And I remember being really excited when I got my driver's license. Because then I could drive myself to the health food store.
Oh my
God!
Right. My kind of gal.
And I remember, in one of the aisles they had their books and they had the prescription for
nutritional healing. Yes.
Yeah, and so they had that book there, and you could, it was like a reference book, and I would just sit there in the aisle and read the book. And I remember checking out vitamins and minerals for dummies from the library and making flashcards out of it. So I was interested in it, but I can't, I still wasn't necessarily using herbs a lot. It was just kind of this thing that I found really interesting. And so I went on with my life and went to college and studied foreign languages. And after college, my life took a really sharp right turn in that I thought I was going to go travel the world and teach English as a second language. But I became really interested in the natural world and wilderness skills. And I started going to a school in Washington State. And it was a primitive living skills school is what they call it. But I studied everything there, but I became more and more fascinated with plants. One of the head teachers there is an ethnobotanist and basket maker. Nice. And it was this really transformative process where I began to see, having grown up in generally smaller cities, but growing up in cities primarily, my focus became more and more attuned to the natural world. And I was spending more and more time out in the wilderness, out hiking, out camping, and all the while learning about plants. And studying with an ethnobotanist was a really special thing because we weren't just reading about herbs. We were more actively in the field, looking at herbs, harvesting herbs, using them as food. Karen, my teacher, was so great. It was always about the practical use. It was always about bringing them into our lives. So I was doing that, and it was still kind of this hobby thing. I was on this thing that I was loving. It was this transformative thing. It was new. It was exciting. I felt like I was having these paradigm shifts of just recognizing our role in the greater world out there beyond the cities. And while I was going to that school, I started to get this really mysterious illness. It started off with this rash that would move around my body. Like one day it would be on my thighs and the next day it would be on my arms. And and I kind of just ignored it. I was like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
But like I don't know what to do about that. So I just ignored it. And then I started having like joint pains here and there, like bilateral joint pains. And now that's such a huge clue to me. But back then I was kind of like, oh, that's weird. Like maybe I was making the basket too roughly.
Right.
I just kind of ignored it. And but after several months, I woke up. I remember the day, it was February 4th, and I woke up and I had this pain so intense over my whole body that I could barely move. And I had a really high fever. And because I had a fever, I thought I had the flu. And it was a weird fever, though. The fever would ramp up during the day until I'd take my temperature before I went to sleep at night, and it was always 104. And then I'd wake up in the morning and my temperature would be 99.
Oh.
And I'd think, well, okay, I'm getting better. But that went on for a month. And,
God.
and the whole time, I just had to put a full stop on my life. And I just laid in bed. I couldn't even hold a book. I'm like a lifetime reader, right? But that's how intense the pain was. And the whole time, I was young. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't have health insurance. I thought I had the flu. And then at some point it was like, oh, okay, this is
more than that.
This is more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And
clearly the
what
flu
actually
should be
ended
done.
up, yeah, exactly. So what happens, I actually ended up getting so dehydrated, and I had friends who were helping to take care of me and get me food and stuff. But in the end, I just kind of succumbed to that. And I started blacking out, and just the only thing I could do was go to the bathroom, and I would black out on the way to the bathroom. So I ended up
to the emergency room, I imagine.
I went to the local clinic that I used to go to. It was like a low income clinic, and I went there first, and they ended up putting me on the ambulance to the hospital.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a long drawn out story. I didn't mean to get so into it, but basically the long and the short of it is that spent 4 days in the hospital, and they did all sorts of crazy tests because they had no idea what was going on. Mm-hmm. And because I was doing this like weird wilderness school stuff, they
figured it was an environmental allergy.
Yeah. So they tested me for a lot of really kind of exotic diseases and a lot of strange stuff. And I remember the nurse coming in for more blood, and I would joked I don't have any more to give. But it took them a couple weeks. But in the end, they came up and they said, well, you have an autoimmune disease, and it's really rare. And so we don't know anything about it. And,
awesome.
they handed me a brochure, and they said, here's a brochure on it. And they said there was a Yahoo listserv that I could join. And that was it. And
support
at
for
the
the
time,
mystified.
it was very scary, and it was very frustrating. And it was also the best gift they could have given me to close the door in my face, essentially, because immediately I was I took it very hard at first.
Okay.
I mean, they gave me that. So kind of the big thing too is that they said that I probably wouldn't live past the age of 40. There was no cure. This is it.
Oh God.
So I immediately was just like, okay, well, there has to be more answers out there for me, because Western medicine has no answers. And I just wasn't willing to accept that. So it just immediately I was able to just kind of let go of Western medicine in that sense and really seek out other answers. And so that became this process. And through that process, I did a lot of self-research, but I also had a team of people, I was working with, from naturopaths to acupuncturists to herbalists. And,
nice.
And so through that process, I was already really open to using plants because of my wilderness skills school. But it really was this huge paradigm shift for me, because I went from thinking of this is my weekend hobby. And, this is something that's cutesy and fun, to something that I began to see the power in it, and how this could really have answers in today's world for really serious chronic issues like I had.
Well, I mean, that's truly a crucible. I mean, the fever and everything, you burned away a lot.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, and it became a survival school for many different reasons. Not just survival in the wilderness, but survival in your own body.
That's very true, yeah.
Hmm. So that started you off. And so what became the first herb that you used for that successfully?
You know, for that illness, I honestly don't know, because at the time I wasn't, I didn't know clinical herbalism at all. You know, I was studying ethnobotany, and so that was like going out into the field looking at, you know, herbs in the wild and then using them.
Right.
And so the herbs I did use for the illness were, I was going to a 5-element acupuncturist, and they were giving me these like just horrible Chinese herbal decoctions. Obviously, I say that with love, because they were, you know, tremendously helpful to me. But man, did they taste bad. Like I would brew them up, and I would sit by, and I would take it by the sink. So I'd like take a shot of the tea and then take a chaser of apple juice, and then like just sit by the sink and hope that it just stayed down.
Oh,
it tasted so bad. It was so horrible. So those are the herbs that I really took, you know, during that time.
Formulas.
And I didn't really, you know, it was Chinese formulas, and I didn't really know what was in them.
Did you work with a traditional Chinese medicine prescriber, or how did
Yes, I was working with acupuncturists who also did herbs. And
Nice.
I do remember, I'm just remembering this now. I went to a naturopath, and I had ended up taking some prednisone. That's one thing the doctors did recommend, is that I take prednisone. They told me it's a steroid. They told me it would stop working after a while, but I should take it. And so I did. And when I saw the naturopath, she recommended that I take ashwagandha to help with my adrenals. And I'd never heard of ashwagandha in my life before. And I remember she gave me a bottle of capsules, you know, and told me to take 1 capsule 3 times a day. Which is funny, because I would never personally recommend that now. It's just, you know, a very small dose, you know, like taking, but I remember doing that as well. And it probably helped.
Well, here you are, living to tell the tale.
So you went through the disease, and you came out of that, and you had learned how to care for yourself. What pushed you the further way to actually seeking a clinical background? Was it just like natural? Of course, you know, now that I've cured myself, I must. Or
it was like that. And I come from a family of teachers, and I've just always seen myself as becoming a teacher. And so I think that was part of it. And that experience for me was so transformational. I mean, it was just like, before the illness, I saw the world, you know, with this color lens. And then I went through this illness, and I used herbs, and it was this just transformative thing to go from thinking that herbs or alternative health is this kind of like, you know, just, it wasn't for real serious things. Like, of course, Western medicine is for serious things.
Right.
And just to realize that Western medicine actually doesn't have, it's amazing as it is,
it doesn't have every answer.
Doesn't have answers for chronic issues.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was just this huge mind shift for me. And my thought was, there must be other people like me who are going through this.
Yeah. Like on your Yahoo group.
That, you know, that was actually a blunder I made with the Yahoo group, because, you know, when we're like young herbalists, and maybe even perhaps later, but I was so excited to tell these people, like, I have the answers, you know, because I had gone through this, you know, healing period, and I was just like ridiculed, and people just really slammed me, which I can kind of see why. Like, I admit that I just didn't probably handle it very well, because in my excitement, you know, but I basically go into this listserv, and I'm like, oh, it's all about your diet, and you got to eat these herbs, and you got to make your vitamin D levels, you know, are good. And people were just like mad almost, you know, and so that was the end of that.
Well, I mean, you were confronting them with some stuff that was definitely, they probably didn't want to hear, because choosing to change your diet that radically is something most of us don't want to do.
Well, and it's also insulting. It's something you've tried every single thing, and someone says, did you try not eating crappy food? You just want to punch him.
Yeah.
You just want to punch
I really
him.
didn't. I did not approach it in a very, I was so green, you know, and I was just enthusiastic, and I can see that I did not approach it in a very good way. So.
At that
youth.
At that point, had you already learned about like constitutional types and herbal energetics, or was that still a piece that you had yet to learn?
Yeah, that I learned much later, and it was interesting to learn it later and recognize that that's what the people who I were seeing were doing, because it's like I went to Western medicine, and it was like, I have autoimmunity, and they're like, oh, there's no cure for that. And that's where that ended, right?
Right.
But I went to see these acupuncturists, these herbalists, these naturopaths, and I'm like, oh, I have autoimmunity. And they're like, that's nice. Who are you?
Yeah.
You know, what are you going through? You know, what is your story? What is your full picture of health? And
right. Your
and that was
disease
just a
doesn't
big shift.
define you.
And that's right. And you know, they didn't say like, oh, there's no cure for that, because they weren't trying to cure that. You know, they were saying, they were looking at it in such a different perspective. So I recognize now that more of that was going on, you know, and unbeknownst to me, you know, the energetics, whether we're dealing with hot and cold, which I'm sure the Chinese practitioners were, or just holistic or energetics from a, you know, that larger point of view.
Right.
So, you know, I love studying ethnobotany with my teacher, and I'm so glad that was my entryway into herbalism, because it was so hands-on and it was actually getting out in nature, and really just getting to know plants on that one-on-one basis. But after that, I decided to study more clinical herbalism. And so I ended up going to the School of East-West Herbology with Michael and Leslie Tierra. And I studied with Paul Bergner, just long distance, but I just soaked up everything I could from Paul Bergner. I started going to every conference I could possibly make it to, and, you know, soaking up all that. I would buy any book that I could possibly afford, beg the library to order in books, and read it that way. And then I did my clinic after I did a 4-year certification with the East-West School of Herbology, and I finished that up with a clinical practice and mentorship with Cartapurtic Singh Khalsa.
He specializes in Ayurvedic, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We see that influence in your book a lot.
Yeah. I'm kind of like, the book definitely has like a broad blend of all of my different teachers and how that's come together. And then I've also studied a lot with Jim McDonald, who I'm very proud to call my friend. But I really like to soak up all of his information too, as he has a very practical way of sharing about herbs and herbal energetics. And so I really, even though I've never, you know, I haven't been able to go to Jim's school per se, I think he has a really profound influence on a lot of my work too.
Yeah, he's a solid guy. Yeah. And a wicked sense of humor.
And a wicked sense of humor.
Oh, wow. That's quite the journey. So what is it that you feel like you pulled the most out of your experience that you seem to come back to over and over again?
Well, 2 things come to mind. One is what I already talked about, it, and that when it's like we've grown up in this culture that diagnoses and treats disease, or tries to anyway.
Treats symptoms of disease anyway.
Treats symptoms of disease, yeah. And I think herbalism is incredibly relevant in today's world because it doesn't do that. At its best, I would say, you know, it looks at the person. It says, what is going on for this person? How can this person be helped? And I think when it's practiced at its best, that isn't just about using herbs, but about all of these other holistic practices that come to mind, like, you know, does the person hate their job? That can have a major impact on someone's health if they're spending 5 days a week, you know, 10 hours a day, or whatever the case might be, at a place that they hate. Like that's a severe impact on our lives. And looking at diet, looking at movement, and also looking at things like, do they spend time in nature? You know, is their life purpose fulfilled? So I think that I still take that with me, and I, you know, I get asked all the time, what herb is good for blank? And which is a natural question, right? Because that's the world we live in. Is we take that one pill for that one disease and hope for the best. But so that's where I see that I took a lot out from my own process, and just trying to help people understand that it's not about substituting that one herb for that one pharmaceutical pill, but it's about thinking about health in a dramatically different way, and how we can infuse our life with health-serving practices, and joyfully too. That's one thing I really love about herbalism, is that, and it kind of brings me to my second point, is that herbalism, especially, you know, when I talk about herbalism, of course, it can mean so many different things, but I think of the herbalists who have their hands in the dirt, the herbalists who are out connecting with the plants, whether they're gardening them or wildcrafting them or just spending time with them. There's a large part of herbalism that's about taking capsules, or, you know, going to the health food store and buying supplements. But what really excites me and what really speaks to that deeper meaning in life is reconnecting with the awe and the inspiration of the natural world and recognizing that there's so much wisdom there, so much healing ability there. So I really, through my process, I took both of those things into account because I had that transformative experience while I was getting back to my roots in nature, while also understanding that health and disease are so much more than what pills we take.
Wow. Well, that's quite the takeaway.
So now we're going to have a word from our sponsor. Now, a word from Thomas Easley about the Journal of Functional Herbalism.
The Journal of Functional Herbalism is a free online journal promoting the integration of traditional Western herbalism, clinical nutrition, and functional medicine. It's published by the Eclectic School of Herbal Medicine, and you can find the Journal of Functional Herbalism at functionalherbalism.com.
Thank you, Rosalie. I appreciate you pointing that out. I think that's a lesson that a lot of people have to learn the hard way.
Yeah, I think to me that connection between the plants and nature and your life and the natural rhythms of life, I mean, that is so very important. I mean, it's and I think it's at the heart of the disease culture that we have right now. I mean, we have even simple things like in the city, the lights are on all the time. You cannot, if you live in the city, you probably most nights cannot tell the difference between a full moon and a dark moon because it's always bright all night long. I mean, that disrupts not only our circadian rhythms, but that of all the animals, all the insects, all the plants. Everything is disrupted with that constant. So, even something as simple as learning how to make your room darker so that you sleep better.
Right.
That might be what you need for insomnia, not some valerian root.
Right.
As much as I love valerian. I mean, it's one of my favorites. But,
yeah, you love that one. I like the flower better.
Yeah.
Valerian flower is my favorite. I think that one of the things that I keep, when I was listening to you talk, I was thinking of, because I work in a free clinic and we see about half of the population we see is unhoused. And so many people have come in with the same situation where they're like, I'm in pain. Can you help me with my pain? And what they've done is they've gone to other clinics before, and what the doctor or whatever prescriber said is, well, here's something that will numb it. The person that is unhoused doesn't need something to numb their pain. They need a prescription for a home.
Yeah.
They need help getting to the point where they can access some other things in the community, so they can get a shower, so they can feel good about themselves, so they can get their feet on the ground. And that doesn't come on a prescription pad. Those are the kind of questions that, as herbalists, by the time they come to our integrated health clinic, those are the questions that we're asking all the time. And those are questions that should have been asked a long time ago. Just because a person's coming into the clinic and they're dressed nicely for that day, because they know from experience they will get more help if they look good. Yeah. Quote unquote good. So they're using their resources to get that kind of good help. And what we're offering is, I'm going to give you a bunch of questions and you tell me what's going on with your life and let's just fix them. Be honest with me. I don't want to spend my time trying to fix a ghost. Tell me what's happening with you. And that the physical effect that I see on people after just getting those questions and getting them an opportunity to talk about what's really happening with their entire life, not with just their symptoms, they physically change. Their facial features change, their body demeanor changes. They become more vulnerable. They understand that they're really there to get help, not just to mask something. It's significant.
Yeah, that's really important work.
Yep.
Yeah, I imagine you've seen in your own practice a lot of people really who are coming to you, like you're the first non-Western medicine stop on their list of people to try, and you probably see them change dramatically from just the beginning of when you sit down with them in a clinical setting to the time when they're going home.
Yeah, I do. I tend to have either like one or the other. The people who I'm like their first stop after they've tried a lot of, Western medicine pathways. Generally, they're referred by a friend, who believes in herbs, and they come kind of like, well, like Aunt Jane said, I needed to come see you. And so I see those. And then I also see, people who are very well versed in using herbs as well.
Nice.
There's a nice part of that in that I think with Western medicine, it's treated like the 7-Eleven of medicine. Like, I can just pop in here and get this little piece and then pop out again. And that's not really the way herbals work.
No.
So the kind of the luxury part of that we can enjoy is that we have people that they've had some trouble and they have tried a lot of stuff. So now they're willing to sit down and spend that time, which they're not used to spending. So all of that kind of pushed you into realizing you needed to get the word out and write this here book.
Yeah.
One of the pieces, go on.
The book kind of came to me, really. I wasn't planning on writing a book, and but I was approached by Hay House to write a book, and I thought, well, I'm not turning down that opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
Goodness sakes.
Well, one of the pieces that I really love about your book is that you have a lot of scientific research supporting many of the uses of the various herbs, but the book itself is not organized around a scientific approach. It's organized around more of what I think of as more of like an energetic or Vedic-ish sort of approach, with which all the herbs being grouped by tastes and what they do from a more energetic perspective.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I think a lot of people might be befuddled by it.
Yeah. Well, so the book, I wanted to write a book that herbalists would love. That was definitely on my mind.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to write a book that could be a bridge for people who might not necessarily think of themselves as herbalists yet. So I thought of that for people, who are just into natural health in general, or people who are foodies, or just kind of have one toe in, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so, to speak to the scientific studies, that was something I did very purposefully. I actually ended up hiring a research assistant to help me find human clinical trials for all of the herbs in the book. And so I used a couple in vitro studies, so outside of the human body studies, but just to kind of make a point but very, very seldomly did I do that. And I didn't use any animal studies for several reasons, mainly ethics. And also I wanted to show, like, this is what we know it can do for humans.
Right. Yeah, so, animals are different. Other animals.
Right.
We all have different physiology.
Right. So in that, I wanted to provide information even for the herbal skeptic. So, when I write each chapter of the book, there's 29 herbs in the book. And for each chapter, each section on the herbs, I pull on a different ways we know about herbs, whether it's from my own experiences, from something I learned from my teachers, from historical texts, and also from the scientific world and what we know through these human clinical studies. And oftentimes these studies are just confirming what we already know as herbalists because it's been passed down to us one way or another.
Yeah.
But I wanted that in there specifically for maybe the herbal skeptic, or as a way to just really prove to our modern day population, because they believe in science, that herbs can really do that. So my hope was that someone would read a chapter in the book, say, they'd read about lemon balm, for example, and they'd say, wow, I didn't know herbs could do that.
Right.
And then they would want to use lemon balm. That would be the next thing. And I wanted to move the discussion about herbs into like actually using those whole plants, fresh or dried in our lives. So a lot of people shaping the herbal discussions today, like not in probably our circles, but in others, wider circles, is they're saying like, oh, here's this supplement that I'm selling, take 2 capsules and call me in the morning. So I wanted this book to inspire the person to use all these different herbs and then incorporate those herbs into their life, into their daily life, whether that's through teas or herbal remedies like a medicinal syrup, or through food. So there is a lot of food recipes in there too. But I did want it to be also a bridge for the non-herbalist into the herbal world to think about energetics and to understand that this isn't necessarily about, like we've been talking about already, taking this one pill for that one problem.
Right.
And to understand how we're all different from each other on that energetic sense. So I might feel, warmer and drier from, the next person who feels, colder and has more damp qualities, and how that relates to herbalism. And so it is meant to be that bridge and kind of showing people that herbalism is different. It's not about just saying what herb is good for eczema, but how to really tune into yourself and who you are, and then use herbs. And so I really, there's like a little exercise in the book for people to just kind of get that sense of, it's just a simple drinking ginger tea to understand, ginger is spicy and it's stimulating and it helps move things. And that is a more profound understanding of ginger. And when we understand it like that, we can use it on so many different reasons, as opposed to like just memorizing a list of things.
Yeah, it starts
that
to
it
make
may or may
more-
not be good for.
It starts to make more like palpable sense. That was one of the pieces I really loved. It's because you've taken the herbs and you've put them into, like, matched them with the tastes and then talked about what the tastes and energetics do. It helps make that connection when the idea, I mean, some tastes are kind of obvious, rose hips, they taste sour. They're in the sour taste. Cayenne, pungent, hot. It's kind of, but then there's the one that I think is an amazingly good choice for trying to explain how weird yet not weird the energetics are, is the nettle one, which is in salty. And I mean, honestly, you don't think of yourself as like, you don't pick up a leaf of nettle and say, oh my God, it's so salty, I need to go drink a bottle. It's like that pizza I had last night is so salty, but there it is. And can you explain why nettle is in salty? Can you like make sense of that?
Yeah. Like you said, some herbs are very obvious to us. And we're just, oh yeah, I get that. And some herbs, especially in the salty and in the sweet category, are a little like, wait, what?
Yeah.
How does that work? So when we classify herbs by their taste, and this is something that's done in Chinese medicine, it's done in Ayurveda medicine to this day, and it was historically done in Western medicine a bit more than it's done today. So Western herbalists are kind of reclaiming this more. But the idea is that herbs are classified not just by the taste of like what it feels like on our tongue, but also what the herb does. So with nettle, it doesn't have, like you said, a salty taste like, say, seaweed would, which is also a salty plant.
Yeah.
But it has what we call a mineral taste. And so it has that like green nutrient taste to it. And so other herbs that are like that could be, another vegetable would be kale. It has that same kind of taste, or chickweed has that same kind of mineral taste to it. So once you start tasting the plants a lot, I could understand more of like what that means, or even if you just think about it a lot. If you already have tasted plants a lot, you can understand what that means. So I talk about that it's not necessarily we're tasting salt, but we're understanding that this is a nutrient dense plant that has a lot of oftentimes minerals in it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that salty taste is usually about tons of minerals and nutrients. So what it does in your body is like very nourishing.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, nettle is a great example of that.
Well, you talk about some of these plants on here that you just said that, when you wouldn't necessarily put them immediately in the department that you've put them in, but that has to do with tasting for something. Rose hips is something you guys mentioned as being sour, and I'm shaking my head like I just immediately define that one as being sweet. That's something I put in my granola is rose hips. So, but I also know, as being someone who for a living tasted and defined herbs for a company, I know to let that sit on your tongue a little bit. And there's a lot, these they don't have to fall under our definitions.
Right.
They have a myriad of flavors.
Right. I could have maybe chosen hibiscus as sour because that's one that's pretty sour. Universal.
That one's down.
Yeah.
That one's pucker power. But I'm glad that you did mention that one because it's complex. Like Shazandra, the 5 flavors. Which one do you pick?
Yeah.
Well, maybe that would be good for someone with a variety of different things that they need balancing, and for someone that needs some sweet and some sour, then there's your rose hips right there because they have a variety of different flavors. So that's getting to know the herb, getting to know the person, and then placing that in the right environment with the menstruum or the carrier that you're wanting to put it through. Either that's honey or capsules or teas or the huge variety of stuff that you've got listed here as options. And I think that's one thing that people also might be startled about when they look through your book is like, that's herbal medicine? I thought it was just some foul brew. Like, well, it can be. It certainly can be. But it's a diversity of different types. You've got your parsley and cilantro pesto. I'm looking at your book here at page, I'm going to use my glasses, 137. There's a nice, beautifully packed pesto recipe. And this is medicine. It's delicious medicine. But that's something that people need to remember too, is medicine ain't no good unless it goes in the body.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And here's a variety of different ways to try it. So I really appreciate how diverse you have this book for folks. They don't just have to try one particular thing. It must have been a blast for you to do the recipe research.
Yeah, that's I've been writing recipes for herbs for a long time now. Basically, it started about 11 years ago. My friend John Gallagher asked me if I wanted to write a newsletter for his company called Learning Herbs and he said, you can do it on whatever you want. And at the time I was making a lot of rosehip syrup, and so I'll do it on rosehip syrup. And that was kind of like, the beginning of a very long relationship and it really like got me started into this like recipe based herbalism as well. And so in writing this book, I definitely felt like, oh, this is what I've been doing for the past 11 years. I'm just further refining the process.
Wow, that's amazing. And yeah, how long have you been working with him, did you say?
11 years.
Gosh, that is a long
decade.
time. And you guys have done so much together. I'm really pleased to see the results of that relationship through Learning Herbs, because it's more than just I had mentioned the webinars before, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Your site is beautiful too.
Yeah. We have an amazing graphic designer that's part of our company now, Jan Bozeman, and so all the beautiful aesthetics are definitely due to him.
Nice. That's good. Good to have a diversity of talents on your crew.
So if folks want to be finding you, how do they contact you? Besides, obviously they should, use the links on our show notes to go buy your book. Duh. But beyond that, how do folks want to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I have my personal website, which is herbswithrosalie.com. And on there, the discussion about herbal energetics and all that kind of stuff is new. Actually, I have a little free course on my website that you can take about herbal energetics and figuring out if you're hot or cold or damp or dry. So nice. I also have lots of herbal recipes and herbal monographs on my site too. So there's lots to click around on there. And we mentioned Learning Herbs. So learningherbs.com is another great website with lots of recipes by me and kind of see the full array of everything Learning Herbs offers.
Lovely. And then do you have Facebook or do you have any social media?
Definitely.
She
I'm most active on Facebook, which I'm sure it's Herbs with Rosalie is my business on there, or people can follow my personal account. And I'm also on Twitter as well, and Pinterest, and but I think those are the three main ones for now.
Sure. And then if someone wanted to email you or contact you, I assume they could find you through herbswithrosalie.com.
Yeah, that's the best way.
And then we'll put that information on our show notes as well.
Great.
Well, thank you very much for being with us. I really appreciate it. And congratulations on the publication of Alchemy of Herbs. It's been a real pleasure having you here.
Thank you very much for having me.
The statements made about herbs and products on this podcast have not been evaluated by the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. All information provided on this podcast or any affiliated websites is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for advice from your physician or other healthcare professional. You should not use the information on this podcast and its affiliated websites for a diagnosis or treatment of any health problem. Always consult with a healthcare professional before starting any new vitamins, supplements, diet, or exercise program before taking any medication, or if you have or suspect you might have a health problem. Any testimonials, questions, or case studies are based on individual results and do not constitute a guarantee that you will achieve the same results.